Suddenly, at the age of 22 and fresh out of college, I am burdened with $120,000 in debt. What's more problematic is that my parents show a clear bias in their affection toward my twin sister, Nicole. After graduating from high school, I was interested in studying law. I wanted to get a scholarship, but my parents, unsure if I could secure one, encouraged me to use educational loans to ensure payments. At the time, I was still under 18 and knew almost nothing about loans. Trusting my parents, I followed their advice and applied for a loan. Most of the application paperwork was handled by my parents, and I signed as instructed without sufficient information. Later, I received the results of the scholarship application and found that I was partially awarded a scholarship. When I inquired about the scholarship details, my parents assured me that the scholarship would cover half of the tuition and that they would handle the rest. Despite the scholarship reducing my tuition by half, I started to have doubts. The university provided support for meals and accommodation, as well as quarterly scholarships, which meant the required loan amount was only half of the tuition. The remaining expenses were managed through other means. I supported myself by working part-time at a cafe and never once brought up this topic at home during the past 4 years. My parents wanted Nicole to pursue either law school or a more stable profession, but she decided to follow a career in modeling. As for me, I chose not to pursue further degrees after graduation and instead gained work experience. I started an internship at a law firm. Then I received a repayment notice from the bank for a $120,000 loan. When I checked the massive invoice via email, I discovered that the tuition fees for the 8 semesters I attended, even with interest, amounted to less than $60,000, yet the claimed amount was double that. Considering that the total amount, including the money my parents contributed for my dormitory expenses, didn't even reach $70,000, I immediately contacted them for clarification. They explained that the full tuition fee of $120,000 was taken out as a precaution in case the scholarship was not awarded. Confused by this, I reminded them that the scholarship had covered half of the tuition fee. I began to suspect something when the bank withdrew the full tuition amount, despite the fact that the scholarship was supposed to cover expenses like meals and lodging. My parents made excuses, but I immediately saw through their lies. Determining that the issue couldn't be resolved over the phone, I visited them in person last weekend. At first, they tried to change the subject, but after my repeated demands for an explanation, they eventually confessed. After multiple exchanges, they admitted that the remaining amount was paid directly toward Nicole's tuition. Learning this infuriated me, and I accused them of always favoring her, pointing out that their overprotectiveness was harming her future. In response, my mother began to defend herself. They insisted they loved both of their children equally. Initially, they claimed they didn't intend to allocate part of my tuition to Nicole, but when I received part of the scholarship, they ultimately decided to give half of it to her. I pressed them for their reasoning and asked why they hadn't considered a separate loan for Nicole. They explained that Nicole's high school grades weren't good enough for an independent loan application, and since they had already used their house as collateral for my tuition, they had no other assets to offer. I declared that I would only pay $70,000 and that the remaining $50,000 should be covered jointly by Nicole and my parents by the next morning before leaving. While spending time alone in my room, my father knocked on the door and said he wanted to have a serious talk. However, it wasn't the conversation I had hoped for. Once again, the topic of the loan came up. My father explained that as a parent, he felt it was his responsibility to secure the futures of both his children. For that reason, I felt I had to ask why he had invested so much in Nicole. He explained that he had done everything to ensure Nicole could attend university, but she ultimately chose to pursue a modeling career instead. Sarcastically, I asked if Nicole had achieved anything noteworthy over the past 4 years. Although my father answered negatively, he added that he couldn't interfere with her efforts. I regretted my harsh tone but knew it was too late to take it back. I told him that $120,000 was far too excessive for me to bear. In response, my father argued that I am currently earning a decent salary at my job and that my income is expected to increase as I transition to a full-time position within a few months, making loan repayment manageable. When I countered, he pointed out that while I am only 22 and it might take me 5 years to fully repay the loan, I have a stable career path ahead of me, unlike Nicole. I questioned why I must bear financial responsibility for my sister when her future is still uncertain. Once again, I was subjected to a lecture about how women must learn a great deal to become good wives and mothers in the future. I couldn't agree with that at all, and listened with nothing but frustration. Ultimately, I am uncertain if I truly need to pay the $50,000 on behalf of my sister, if it is genuinely my obligation, or if I am simply being asked to cover for her because I have an income. When I consulted some friends about the matter, they said that if Nicole were paying, I should also pay, but that was not the reality. Additionally, my college classmates opined that I should not be responsible for covering the entire cost. At the very least, they believed Nicole should contribute some amount. It is worth noting here that educational loans cannot be transferred to others. However, with personal loans, such a transfer is possible. Typically, educational loans are directly deposited into the university's account, but a portion is also sent to the student's account to cover expenses like meals, lodging, and textbooks. Since some subsidies were applied to university facilities, most of the remaining living expenses were covered by part-time work. As a result, my parents wisely withdrew the remaining $50,000 from my personal account and transferred it to Nicole. This was possible because my parents had access to my account. At the time, I was 18 years old and barely understood the details of banking. In hindsight, it might have been due to my lack of experience. Looking back, I feel that my ignorance of these matters was a mistake. But this is the information I can share with you now. Later, through online research and further questioning of my parents, I uncovered several facts. You might be surprised to learn how my parents carried out their plan to withdraw the funds. It became clear that my parents withdrew the money and used it for something. However, there was never an instance where the charges actually reached $50,000. How exactly did they manage to accomplish that? Amazingly, they had created fake invoices. My parents admitted that they had no other choice, but that was not true. There were other options available to them, and withdrawing my funds was not the only solution. Several times I angrily considered leaving the house, but I quickly realized that it was not the wise thing to do. The reason was that the person who needed resolution wasn't my parents but me. The loan is in my name, and it is my credit that would be damaged by this issue, not theirs. If I were to default, the responsibility would fall solely on me. Thus, I calmly explained to them that they needed to be prepared to pay the $50,000 in case Nicole couldn't repay the loan. My mother emphasized that I was their only daughter and that it was my duty to care for the family and my sister. She cited examples of other relatives who had bought houses and cars for their parents and criticized me for not contributing anything. Does being their only daughter mean Nicole isn't their daughter? I was exasperated by the lack of logic in their argument. Furthermore, I had kept Nicole completely out of this discussion, but my parents strongly insisted that she not be involved because of the stress she was experiencing. They claimed she was mentally unstable due to the pressures of her current work and situation. My mother argued that Nicole couldn't handle stress at all, but I countered by pointing to her social media page, where she regularly posted pictures of herself partying with friends, seemingly unaffected. However, my parents argued that she needed to appear happy on social media to become a celebrity in the future. This was an utterly nonsensical rebuttal. Ultimately, I decided to speak to Nicole directly about the financial issue. I felt it was time to stop treating her with excessive care. That night, I stayed up late, waiting for her to come home after midnight as she usually did. By the time she returned, my parents were already asleep. I saw this as the perfect opportunity. When I heard the sound of her car pulling up in front of our house, I pretended to be casually eating ice cream to make it seem like a coincidence. When she came in, I offered her a bite of ice cream. Then, I started talking about topics she might find interesting, like stories about our cousins or neighbors. To help her feel at ease, I also brought up the latest gossip about her school friends. As her sister, I felt no need to act stiff or formal. However, because our parents had spoiled her, we had not grown particularly close. I used to strongly dislike her. During the conversation, I asked her about her work situation. From her response, it didn't seem like she was facing any significant issues at her job. So I asked about any courses she had taken or skills she had developed to pursue her dreams. She simply said, "No." Afterward, I asked what she had done with the money our parents had given her. She hesitated for a moment and then asked, "What money?" I explained that I was referring to the $50,000 student loan. "Do you know what she used that money for?" It wasn't for cosmetic surgery or lip enhancements or anything like that. She had wasted the money entirely on parties and vacations with her friends. She could have spent it in far more meaningful ways. I had managed to stay calm until that point, but at that moment I completely lost my composure. I couldn't understand why she would squander such a large sum of money on mere parties, and I couldn't hold back my anger. She responded defensively, saying, "This has nothing to do with me. Obviously, it's irrelevant. You're asking me to repay money spent smoking with friends." Our argument grew increasingly heated until our parents woke up and intervened in our quarrel. They scolded me, saying things like, "Why would you say such things and why are you pressuring her so much?" They made me out to be the bad one, and when I asked why they continued to spoil her, they replied, "It's about the money." But the real problem wasn't the money itself, it was that she had wasted it recklessly and showed no remorse. Normally, I would have kept silent, but this time, I couldn't. When I asked my parents if they were aware of this, they tried to calm me down, suggesting, "Let's talk about this calmly in the morning." However, I insisted on resolving the matter immediately and firmly told them that I would absolutely not pay for the money Nicole had spent extravagantly. Nicole provocatively replied, "As long as the tuition is paid, that's enough. The rest is my business." She further argued, "The loan is in your name, so the legal responsibility doesn't fall on me." In a way, she was right. At that moment, I felt utterly defeated and realized I had reached my limit with them. I made it clear to my parents that either they or Nicole needed to pay for those expenses. Then, I stormed out of the house and took refuge at a college friend's place for the night. The next morning, without speaking to anyone, I returned to my dormitory. Fortunately, the advice I had received from the bank officer I first contacted proved to be invaluable. He was very supportive and explained the loan process in detail. After the intense conflict with Nicole and my parents, I consulted the bank officer, who helped me uncover that the invoices had been falsified and the loan amount had been fraudulently withdrawn. Based on this, he informed me that I could potentially sue my parents. However, to proceed, I first needed to gather all the original invoices. Since I had planned to move from the dormitory to an apartment after graduation, I had already started packing, and most of the invoices were missing. Recollecting them would not be an easy task. I spent several days thoroughly searching through emails and various applications to locate all the invoices. A few mornings after that argument, I handed copies of the collected invoices to my parents. Under normal circumstances, this action might have satisfied me, but I was still overwhelmed with anger and couldn't forgive them for ignoring me. I had no intention of speaking to my parents, so I decided to take the one action they would least want troubling their beloved Nicole. I sent Nicole excerpts from legal provisions related to loan fraud, clearly outlining the penalties, including charges for fraud if repayments between $20,000 and $50,000 were not made. I informed her that I held all the original invoices and had no hesitation about pursuing legal action against my own parents. Although Nicole didn't respond, I eventually received a call from my father. I didn't answer the call, so he left a voicemail instead. In the message, he accused me of failing to fulfill even the minimum responsibility toward my sister and of acting out of greed. Nicole and I are only 2 minutes apart in age. Still, if she had used that money for a worthwhile purpose, I might have considered paying. Moreover, if she had admitted any fault or expressed regret for her spending, there might have been room for improvement in the situation. However, she seemed to feel proud of her expenditures. I cannot understand why my parents feel entitled to take the money I have earned on my own. When I forwarded the message I sent to Nicole to my parents, I received a reply from my mother. She accused me of being greedy, stubborn, and selfish. I didn't care how they labeled me, and simply told them that they should pay the required amount. After several heated arguments and exchanges of blame, my father said he needed time to review their financial situation and would get back to me afterward. However, a week has passed since that promise, and I still haven't heard back from them. Perhaps threatening to sue was a bit too aggressive, but what other choice did I have? In reality, I cannot afford to pay that amount. That money is part of the savings I have carefully managed up to now. I once again issued a stern warning to my parents, saying they must pay the $50,000 or face a fraud lawsuit. It has been over a month since I last contacted my parents. Although 6 months were allowed before the loan's installment payments began, I had already secured a job and started repaying the debt. This marks my 3rd loan payment, and it will take a long time before I can pay off half of it. Even so, I still need to pay the remaining half. Despite this situation, I sent my father another message to confirm their position. I received no reply from him, but a few days later, my parents and Nicole unexpectedly showed up at my apartment. I tried calling my father, but my mother started shouting at me in the hallway. She accused me of being shameless. While my parents did provide me with a good education and raised me, I wanted to avoid causing a scene in the neighborhood, so I invited my parents and Nicole inside. They came in, but Nicole joined my mother in accusing me and attacked me with all sorts of spiteful words. I yelled at Nicole, telling her that spending such a large amount of money so recklessly was shameful and strongly insisted that she should repay it. She argued back, saying she hadn't asked our parents for the money. According to her, since our parents willingly lent it to her, she had no obligation to repay it. Do you think such a claim is reasonable? Clearly, it is not. My mother tried to pressure me, claiming they had mortgaged the house for my future. I lost patience and responded, then stopped paying the loan and asked the bank to auction the house to settle the debt. That statement seemed to make them realize I was serious. The persuasion that had continued until then ceased, and they left the house without another word. About a month later, I contacted my father again and reiterated that they still needed to pay the money. He explained that he was planning to partition part of the house for rental purposes and intended to use the rental income to help reduce Nicole's burden and repay the loan. While partitioning the house to repay the loan is regrettable, I believe the responsibility should fall on Nicole. She frequently blames me for devaluing the house, but I can no longer accept such accusations. Currently, I am the one making payments on the loan. When I discussed the loan term with the bank branch manager, he simply stated, "There's no other choice." There is still $70,000 remaining to be paid, and it will take 3 years to repay it fully. During that time, my parents have a grace period to gather the funds. If we are fortunate, by the time those 3 years pass, my parents may be able to provide the necessary funds. Over time, many things have changed. In these 3 years, my life has undergone significant changes. I am now working as a corporate lawyer in Canada and have become engaged to my college sweetheart. We are planning to hold our wedding next year. I feel deeply grateful to have finally paid off the loan and completed the long process of repayment, as well as for my current success. However, I am deeply saddened by the fact that my relationship with my parents has worsened even further. My father agreed to rent out half the house and use the rental income to pay off Nicole's loan, but this situation remains complicated. Initially, the payments were made as planned, but as soon as my father learned that I was working as a high-income, full-time employee at a major company, he immediately stopped making payments. He occasionally cited reasons like tenants delaying rent payments. Additionally, he claimed that rising medical expenses for my mother and debts from his business required additional funds, which caused further delays in payments. For the past 2.5 years, he has used these various excuses to repeatedly postpone payments. In the meantime, I have been the only one making payments. My fiancé informed me that Nicole wasn't solely relying on our parents for money, which made me wonder what he meant. When I asked how certain he was, he pointed out that my mother and Nicole never missed an opportunity to flaunt expensive designer clothes and the latest jewelry at family gatherings. He provided photos of my parents and Nicole taken at several events as evidence. Seeing these photos, I realized once again that my parents viewed me as a financial resource, leading to great disappointment and distrust. Unable to suppress my emotions, I sent my father a final ultimatum, stating that if they did not pay as promised, I would take appropriate action. I was determined to resolve this issue as soon as possible. My fiancé has been my greatest support, helping me through this difficult situation. Since his sister is a police officer, he consulted her and enlisted her professional assistance. His sister quickly contacted my parents, informing them that I was prepared to file a police report if payments were not made. However, as this was clearly a civil matter and unlikely to be treated as a criminal case, my parents sought an informal resolution to avoid court. Although I feel deeply troubled by having to take such measures, I had no other choice. In the end, my father reluctantly agreed to make the payments. However, after the loan was fully paid off, my father sent me a harsh letter declaring that he was disowning me. The letter contained the stern words, "Never contact us again." This sudden development left me in shock, and I broke down in tears. My fiancé comforted me, saying, "This isn't your fault. They're just greedy and spiteful." Still, it was incredibly painful to be treated this way by my own family. Through tears, I felt a sense of guilt and even considered returning the money they had paid. But once I calmed down, I realized that no matter how much I had done for them, they would never feel remorse. Now I have developed the strength to live unaffected by the criticism of others.